Hi guys, this is our first set of notes for our new unit 4B, Modeling with Math. The first little lesson we're going to do, it's definitely review. It's just creating linear equations, given information, and then tomorrow we'll do linear word problems. All right, so at the top of your paper, make sure you go ahead and put your title up at the top. These are notes 4B, creating linear equations. We're going to look at this, just what the general forms of linear equations are. There's three that we're going to look at. There's standard form. Standard form is ax plus by equals c. We use this form a lot when we're doing like systems of equations. There's also something called point slope form, which will highlight two things about your equation. It will highlight one point and the slope. It's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And the last one is the one that we're going to use today, the one you guys probably know. It's just slope-intercept form. And that's the y equals mx plus b. So for some of our problems today, you could use this point slope form if they give you a point and a slope. We're just going to focus on only having to do one though. So we're just going to focus on that y equals mx plus b just to kind of streamline things for us. All right, so we're going to be writing the equation given 5 different scenarios, information that's given, and then they tell you to write a line. So the first one is just if they give you the slope and they give you the y-intercept. That's going to be the easiest one. What you're going to do for step 1 is just identify slope m. And y-intercept b. And then just plug m and b into slope-intercept form. So for all of your equations, you're going to have a y and you're going to have an x, but the m and the b are going to be replaced by numbers. So for this first example, go ahead and write an equation of the line with a slope of -2/3 and a y-intercept of 4. So slope of -2/3 and a y-intercept of 4. So when they give you the slope, that's your m, and they give you your y-intercept, that's b. We're just going to plug those things in for m and b. So our equation would just be y equals -2/3 plus 4. Okay, so pretty easy, right? All right, now let's go about if they give you a graph. Okay, so if they give you a graph, that's going to be like our next one. So when they give you a graph, the first thing that you want to identify is your y-intercept. So first, you're just going to identify y-intercept. As b. Then you're going to have to do a little bit of work. So b should be pretty easy to identify on the graph, but the m, the slope, you might have to do a little bit of counting. You're going to find the slope using rise over run. And then the last thing you can do is just like the last problem, you just plug in your m and b into the equation. So I'll give you, you can pause or something to draw this little graph right here. So write an equation of the line shown. So the first thing we want to identify is the y-intercept. So you look on your y-axis and you find what point it hits at. So it hits at the number 4. So it means our y-intercept b is 4. And then when we find our slope, we pick any other point on our graph. Okay, it doesn't matter if I pick this point or this point. It doesn't matter if I pick this one up here. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to just pick this point up here. You just want to pick one that hits directly on a piece. So I go up from 4 to 8. So I go up 4. So I rise 4. and then I go right. It's just one box, but if you look on the axis, that means I go right 2. So I run 2, and then 4 over 2 simplifies that my slope is just 2. So you got to look at your units on your little graph too. So when I plug it in, it's just y equals, my slope is 2, my y-intercept is 4, so y equals 2x plus 4. All right, next one is if they give you a point and the slope. This time they're going to give you a point and a slope. Okay, so first thing you do is identify slope as m and point as x comma y. So the first piece of your point is going to be x, the second piece of your point is going to be y. Then what you're going to do is you're going to plug in m, x, and y to y equals mx plus b. You're going to go ahead and then solve for b, the y-intercept, and then once you have b, you're just going to plug m and b back in. So instead of having to just worry about having multiple different formulas, we're just going to go ahead and use this slope-intercept form rather than point-slope form. But if you know how to use it, feel free to. Here's our example. You're going to write an equation of the line that passes through -1, 3 and has a slope of -4. All right, so step 1 is to identify your slope as m. So my slope is -4, and then my point is x, y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in my y as the number 3, my m as the number -4, and my x as -1. So the only thing I won't have is b, and that's what I'm going to solve for in step 3. So for y, I'm going to plug in 3 equals m is -4, x is -1 plus b. And I'm just going to solve for b. So -4 times -1 is 4. And then to get b by itself, I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides. So I get b is equal to -1. That's not my answer though. My answer is the equation y equals m, which is -4, x plus b. But it's a minus, so it would be -1. So again, I just went ahead and used my m, my x, and my y. I plugged them in for these 3 things and then just solved for the missing piece b. And then once I had it, I just plugged it in like we did the first problem. All right, this picture is going to go on our first slide. We're going to flip our paper over though because we have 2 more types to talk about. The next one is if you are given 2 points, okay, if you're given 2 points. So the first thing that you want to do is if you're given 2 points is you have to find the slope of those 2 points. Find slope using, hopefully this formula looks familiar to you, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then we're basically going to do what we did on the last problem. You're going to go ahead and use the slope m. And 1 point as xy. In the equation, y equals mx plus b. And then just like the last problem, the only thing that you won't have is b. So you're going to go ahead and solve for b. And then last step, you'll just plug m and b back into the equation. All right, so here's our example. It says write an equation of the line that passes through -2, 5 and 2, -1. All right, so what we're going to do is we're first going to find the slope using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So here's how we label our points. Every point has an x and a y, right? X and a y, X and a y. Well, there are 2 points. So in order to tell the x's and y's apart, I'm going to call this first point, point 1. So I'm going to put 1's here. And I'm going to call the second point, point 2. So I'm going to put little 2's here. Does it matter which one's point 1 and which one's point 2? No. So then I'm just going to use my slope formula. So to find the slope, it's y2, which is -1, minus y1, which is 5, over x2, which is 2, minus x1, which is -2. So on top I have -1 minus 5, which is -6. And on the bottom I have 2 minus -2, which turns to addition. That's 4. So my slope is -3/2, because I can simplify that fraction, -6 over 4. All right, I'm still working. That was just step 1. We found the slope. That's m. Then we're going to use that slope and one of the points. It does not matter which one of the points. I'm just going to pick the first one just because it's first, and I'm going to plug in, this is my x, this is my y, and then I'm going to use this for my m. So when I plug it in to y equals, I get 5 equals m, which is -3/2, times x, which is -2, plus b, which is what we're trying to find. So I get 5 equals, I have -3/2 times -2. Well, a negative times a negative is going to turn positive. And then 3/2 times 2, when you multiply the top 3 times 2, you get 6, and divide by 2, these cancel each other out. So you're just left with 3 plus b. Subtract 3 on both sides, and we get b equals 2. So now I have m, I have b, and I put them into an equation, y equals m x plus b. All right, that one probably has the most work. The last one is if they give you a point and then a parallel or perpendicular slope. So on the warm-up, I asked you about parallel, perpendicular slopes. All right, so the first thing you want to do is, first thing you need to remember actually, is that parallel slopes are the same but perpendicular slopes are opposite reciprocals. So I have to write this down, but opposite means one's plus and one's minus, and reciprocal means that you flip it. So one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative, and if you flip one, then you should get the other. Okay, so that's opposite reciprocals. That's what that means. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to go ahead and do is you're going to decide if the slope, decide what slope you're going to use, m. Are you going to use the same slope or the perpendicular slope? Then you're going to go ahead and plug in m and point x comma y. 2y equals mx plus b. You're going to solve for b. I don't have enough room. And then step 4, you're just going to plug in m and b to your y-intercept form. All right, so here is our last example. So it says, write an equation of the line that passed through the point 1, 2 and is perpendicular to the line y equals 1/2 x plus 4. All right, so step 1 says to decide slope m. So they gave us an equation. Okay, here's our equation. And in this equation, they give us a slope. Okay, they don't say here's the slope, but they give you a slope. So the slope of this line is 1/2. It says we want the perpendicular slope. So perpendicular means we're going to have to use the opposite. So when we do the opposite of 1/2, that's positive, so the opposite would be negative. And then the reciprocal means that we're going to flip. So when you take 1/2, it becomes 2/1. So our slope is just -2. Then we're going to use our point. Our point is xy. We're going to plug it into y equals mx plus b. So y equals -2 for m, 1 for x, and b is what we're trying to find. So 2 equals -2 plus b. Add 2 to both sides, and we get b is equal to 4. Plug them all back in. Y equals mx plus b. And that's our answer. So the first thing, like I said, you have to do is decide on your slope. So you look at what the line is, find your slope of this line, and then decide, are you using the same? Because if this said the word parallel, we would use just 1/2. But if it says perpendicular, we have to find the opposite reciprocal. And then you can just use your point. All right, that's it for our examples for our notes. So this goes in, I already forgot, slide 4 and slide 5. So go put those into your new digital notebook and work on some practice.